Hey everyone, I'm Mark Snodgrass, and today I wanted to go over how to use Domo and Magic ETL to create additional entries that you might need to show the history of a status for a product and the different status changes that it goes through in its life cycle. You only have the dates that things change on, but you don't have those dates in between. Using Magic ETL and the calendar data dimension data set, we can pull that off. So I'll show you how to do that. Let's get started. So you see here, here's a sample data set, and we've got a date and a product and the status on that date, what it was. And then we don't have any entries in between, but then a few days later, that product, the status changes to the sale price and different price. And then a few days later, then we get another status change and a different price. And then here we've got some other products and same kind of life cycle, but happening on different dates, and you don't have those continuous dates. And you want to get to something like this, where you've got every single day you're showing and the product, and then the status for every single day for that product and the price showing. And then you can toggle here in between showing that. So how did we get to this? Well, you use Magic ETL in order to do that. So let's walk through what this ETL is doing. First thing up here is the calendar data dimension set. This is super helpful. I use it all the time. It's a built-in one. You can find it searching for Domo Dimensions in the connectors. And it's got a row for every day of the year going back a long ways and going into the future. I'm just going to select the date column is all I care about in there. There's a lot of other useful columns in there, but I don't need it. And then for this sample, I'm just going to filter here to the current year and the first month, because that's what my sample data set is using. You probably would want to use some other filter rule for you, but I would suggest doing some sort of filter so you're not overpopulating your data. In this, get it something manageable. And then here I set a constant called join key that I'll use here in the next step. Then with my data set that I showed you in that Excel file, we've just got those rows that we have in here. But what we need to do is generate some values. First thing we're going to do is use the ranked window tile. And we're going to use the lead function in here. And I'm going to create a column called end date, and using the lead on the date field by an offset of 1, that's going to get me the next row, the next date in the data set. And I'm going to create an end date off of that. So that will get me, if I hit apply here, then what it's doing is I sort on the date ascending, and then I'm partitioning on the product. So breaking that up every time it changes product, then we're going to reset this looking at that next row. We're going to get the next date in the future here. So you see, starting out with the first date, we're looking ahead one row, and we see we pull the 8th because that's the next row for Doritos in here. And then if we look at this row, the lead date is the 14th. And then we don't have one for the one after that because there is nothing in the data set for after clearance, and we reset to Pringles. So now we're looking at that date and getting the lead 1 off of that. So now we've kind of created an end date of when this Doritos regular price was. It was from the 1st to the 8th, essentially. So now to deal with that null value, we're on that last row. What we're doing is, hey, we're overriding the end date and saying, hey, if it's null, we're going to use the end date. And if it's null, then we're going to use the current date. You might want to do something different depending on what you've got going on, but the current date is going to work here for this. So now if we look at this, clearance has an end date of 8/31, which is just fine for what we're doing here. So now everything has a value. Now we're doing a constant on here with the join key that I create. It's kind of a common term I use on my constants to set up a join. and doing a value of 1. So both of these have a value of 1. And then I'm going to do an inner join on that join key column for each of these. So we're basically, I'm overpopulating this data set, if you will. So you see, I'm going to see January 1st repeatedly here for every single row in my data set that I have. So this data set's going to get really big temporarily for basically because I had 9 rows before, I'm going to see every date from the calendar 9 times and get that generated out. Then the next step is to then kind of shrink that up. So we're going to shrink that up by saying, hey, when the date from the calendar dimension data set is greater than or equal to the start date, and when the date is less than the end date, then that's the only rows we want to include. So what does that look like then? Then this gets shrunk down so that the Doritos here is now looking at just this set of rows for that regular price. We're going to see those rows repeated over and over for Doritos for each of the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth for regular price. Now we're getting those generated out until we hit the 8th, and then it's going to change. We're not going to see Doritos regular price anymore. We're going to see a Doritos sale price because now we're at the 8th, and that's when the sale price started. So we're going to start hitting those and getting those generated. So then what does that look like? It's a little easier to see if we flip over to that card, that then we get this data set. So then we have, hey, Doritos, we see the 2nd through the 31st, and showing that history of the status changes, showing regular price was $5. Then the sale price started on the 8th, and that went at $4 until the 13th. And then the 14th is when the clearance one started. And if we look back here, that matches up with what we had in here. And so now we've generated that history. And because my calendar dimension said I limited to the end of January, it was just pulling those dates, then that's why I'm getting that stopping there. So now we've developed that history out, and we could do bar graphs or whatever we want and show that, or tables, whatever your use is. But now we've developed out that history that we can use, and we've got an entry for every date, for every product, and for every status in there. So I hope you found that helpful. As always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks a lot.